I have set out to oversimplify every entry in the SCP Wiki, so you don't have to. Let's continue the study. This is a bag that looks like a satchel. It's kind of like a Mary Poppins bag, but instead of having stuff that you can reach out and take, it's a mouth. It takes the form of any box or bag that you might want to reach your hand into, and you reach in and it takes you. These are 2 beach houses owned by the company Marshall, Carter & Dark. That's one of the companies that is more malicious than not. If the lease is in your name for one of them, basically you just become a ghost. You can walk through walls and be invisible. If you have a lease on the other beach house, you might go missing. This is a really sad story, but it involves a man who, after a certain series of events, loses his partner and doesn't eat. And he's still sustained, but he just does not eat. Lots of hunger related things today. It's a wooden ball that has intricate designs on it. When someone touches it, it imprints to that person. And from then on, it will always teleport to be close to that individual. And if that person stays in that space, it'll inch closer to them until it's touching them. And it just wants to be your friend. This is a woman who can take photos with a specific Polaroid camera. Later, she can use that Polaroid as a window into the vantage point from the photo, and she can actually reach through the photo to interact with things. This is another very famous SCP entry. It's a humanoid entity that looks like an old man, just crazy. It preys on whatever it can find. It has this corrosive material that allows it to just break through anything, and so it can go through walls that way, or it can use its pocket dimension to traverse between spaces. This is an object that resembles a turtle shell that when filled with liquid, it will make that liquid rain for a certain amount of time in a certain area, depending on how much liquid you put in there. This is a backrooms-esque storage facility. It's kind of like a bunker that they found inside of a woman's nostril. She can breathe normally. It's an old World War II time German bunker inside of her nose. This is a canteen that's similar to the vessel of oil that Elisha uses. It's always full of water, and that water has certain healing properties. This is a giant city that's buried half of a kilometer below a farm in New York, and it really feels like a Fallout vault. It's empty because it ran into some misfortune. It's very well designed and organized though. These are designed by Dr. Wondertainment. They're marketed as kids' toys, and they are snails that breathe fire. So there's 6 versions of them, and they're all super fun, but they also can all cause house fires. This is a roller coaster where at a certain point on the coaster, the cars just disappear for 3 minutes, and then they show up near the end of the ride. And in between those 3 minutes, the people on the ride have either experienced 4 minutes or up to 4 months of new ride on this coaster. Don't know how they survive, but they're fine. This one's pretty simple. It's an object that switches your biological sex. It's a lot more complicated than that, but that's what it does. This is a woman that involuntarily causes fights and riots to break out wherever she goes. So she would never be involved in the fighting itself, but it's always happening all around her. Poor thing. This is a miniature dump truck, so it looks like a Tonka truck, but it acts like an actual dump truck. It weighs 90 tons, and it can tow up to 120 tons. It's operated by a remote controller, like you would any other RC vehicle, but it acts, for all intents and purposes, like a dump truck. This is a 9-year-old version of Elijah from Glass, crossed with Wolverine. So his bones are super brittle, but whenever he breaks them, he regenerates them super quickly. This is a multi-tool that will generate a specific tool for a specific need. So if you have a specific thing that you need to do, it will generate exactly what you need to get the job done, and then the tool will just disappear. These are small organisms in the ocean that will for some reason build a nuke on the bottom of the ocean and set it off. This is basically a microwave, but instead of heating an object, it ages the object. So it was found at a winery because people were using it to age their wine. You can age an item anywhere from 15 minutes to 31 million years. This is an indestructible kiddie pool that has like a glowing, radiating liquid in the bottom of it. If you step into it and you're carrying less than a certain amount of weight, you will be teleported somewhere. It's a portal. The location where you're teleported depends on the color of the liquid, but there are 11 of them, and Foundation uses them actively. This is a city where the buildings will randomly levitate and then crash together and form creatures that are huge in size, but they're made of concrete and metal, and they are terrifying. No one knows why this happens, but the whole city is obviously evacuated. This is a nightlight that used to provide a lot of peace to kids that were sleeping, but because it's old old and the parts that are used to make it are out of production, there's a lot more creepy things happening. It's very reminiscent of the Mandela catalog, similar Angel vibes. This is a black hole that has been contained, so it's no longer growing, but the Foundation has suggested using it for waste disposal. You just throw it in the black hole, it's gone. This is a plot of soil that can grow plants super fast and super well. So it'll bring that plant to its fullest potential. So you can grow like insane tomatoes or awesome watermelon. Just don't try anything that wasn't intended to be grown in the ground. Weird things happen. So this is a dot on the surface of a mirror or any reflective surface. It can transfer to another reflective surface as long as it's reflected into that surface. The goal of this entity is to get reflected into someone's retina. So as your eye is technically a mirror, and then at that point it can be reflected onto any surface your eye reflects onto. This is an invisible, incorporeal woman that will walk and talk and act like a person. She can't walk through walls. People who interact with her think that they've found their imaginary friend from childhood, or they've known this person for years, or they're a deceased relative. This is a gun that has organs and shoots alien teeth. The magazine cannot be removed from the gun, and it shoots about 60 shots before it has to reload, and it takes about 3 to 5 days for that ammunition to grow because it's organic matter. This is an immaterial source of kinetic energy. It feels very similar to a poltergeist. It will propel non-living solid objects with any amount of kinetic force. So it'll take a chair and it'll throw it across the room. It chooses the objects randomly and just makes a mess of everything. This is a fungal infection that is very, very reminiscent to Resident Evil Village, if you know what I mean. It slowly takes over the person or the host, and there's different stages, but at the end of it, it will cause that host to explode and the spores go everywhere and infect more people. This is an anomalous post office. The packages that show up there and leave there disappear. No one works there, and they're all addressed to locations that don't exist or used to exist but no longer exist. These are tear-shaped creatures. They're super small and they only have one eye, and they just roll around. There's a theory that they were created to watch entities that need to be watched consistently, like the Weeping Angels or 173. This is like a 3D Catan board. It's made of a glass tetrahedron, and every single segment has desert sand on it, and so it acts like a desert, and it's kind of like a terrarium in the sense that there's scorpions and snakes that show up, and it's an unidentified part of the desert, but there are multiple of them, so people have different segments of this desert. This is a creation by the factory. It's a circular piece of waxy black paper that if you place it on a surface, it will create a hole in that surface that is circular to the same diameter. It works on any surface depending on the density and how reflective that material is. This is a young girl that instead of having normal eyes, she has completely blacked out dark eyes. In darkness, you can see little sparkles. Researchers have looked further into the sparkles and realized that those are shining galaxies and universes inside of this girl's eyes. This is a woman who is alive, but she isn't coherent. She has this area around her where she promotes incessant, continuous cell growth. Outside of the space directly around her, like inches away from her, it results in cancer and the cells decay. But inside that really small area, the cells don't die, so it just continues to grow all around her. This is a creepy doll. Kind of can tell what happens because of the entry name. There's another version of the doll that shows up. The Foundation actually wants to use it as a method of enhanced interrogation. This is an entity that can turn toys into the real version of whatever they represent. So if there's a toy gorilla, boom, actual gorilla. It only turns them into the actual version of the toy as the child would perceive it. So it might be a super fluffy lion, but the lion is still as dangerous as the child can perceive it to be. This is an Egyptian man who was discovered in an Egyptian tomb, sealed. He's apparently been alive for longer than 4,000 years and has sustained multiple fatal injuries. He just won't die. So he's kind of the definition of like immortal. This is a security specialist who is working at the Foundation, and Lucian essentially left, escaped, and is now on the run as the Foundation tries to catch up. This is an interesting dive into what happens when Foundation members decide that they want to leave or go somewhere else. This is a chronicle of the Deva culture. They are a group in the Foundation that is just virulent. There's a lot of sacrifices happening. There's a lot of blood rituals. It's just very dark. Whenever it comes in contact with liquid that could be used to write further pages and add to the book, it will. This is kind of similar to Death Note. It's a book somebody can actually write the proceedings of a court case into the book, and any information they enter into it that might be false becomes true in the context of the court. They can essentially falsify any information they want to in the court proceedings and get away with it. This is a slot machine that instead of taking a coin or money, it takes any object, and if you lose the object, but if you win, that object is multiplied anywhere between 2 and 200 times. This is a cherry blossom with super sharp metal petals. They can be used to forge really strong weaponry and armor. This is a thin rope that extends from the top of a mountain to somewhere outside of our atmosphere. Several times a year, Tibetan monks will go and climb the rope. The hope is that they will return and they will enlighten the rest of the people. This is a 2002 cordless phone that when it rings and is picked up, all the person hears on the other end is someone begging for assistance because they're in a bad situation and being tortured to some degree. If that person who picked up the phone is left unattended for long enough, they will disappear, and then their voice will be added to the various people that can be on the other end of the phone when it's picked up. This is a bronze statue of a head resembling a young woman wearing a crown, and whenever you stare into its eyes, you are reminded of times in the past where you experience shame, and the longer you stare into the eyes, upwards of 30 minutes, they eventually stretch into hallucinations and get very dangerous for the person. This is a TV that plays 1950s era comedies like I Love Lucy, as long as there's only material in the room around the TV that was produced before that era. If there's anything that has been manufactured after that era in the room with the TV will freak out and it'll show really disturbing imagery. This is a metal that's basically what makes up the helmets that Magneto and Juggernaut wear from the X-Men. It dampens any telepathic energy or ability that's being used around the metal. This is a breed of mosquitoes that when they bite a human, there's a 50% chance that it'll release this virus into the person, which causes any of the cells affected to be turned into mosquito cells. Things progress from there, it gets really bad for the person. For some reason, it's on par with people melting after opening the Ark of the Covenant. This is a parasite that will slowly replace every part of you with a copy of itself. So every part of you eventually becomes part of the colony of this parasite, but you don't realize that anything's different and you think everything's okay. This is a painting of someone's perspective underwater looking up at the sky. Anyone who views it will eventually later pass away via drowning, and they'll find seawater in the victim's lungs. This is a book that contains every possible way in which humanity could have ended itself up until this point. And whenever we reach another time or a decision that could have ended in an apocalypse, the book adds to itself. The last 50 years that this book records are primarily decisions that were made poorly by the Foundation. These are worms that can camouflage themselves to look like a shower drain or a toilet drain or a sink drain. When an unsuspecting person goes and uses one of those, the worm attacks. Ugh. These are 2 bronze bracelets. When you wear them on the same arm and then you pretend to hook an arrow and pull the bow to its full tension, a bow will appear, and then when you release the bow, it will fire an arrow, but that arrow will be the bones in your arm. The bones in your arm will regenerate eventually, but it's still painful. This is a computer array that is designed to affect an area of space around it so that you can input a really complex calculation that might take years and then give you the answer in minutes. These pomegranate arrows, if you eat one of them, you will be fine. Nothing will happen to you until September 21st. And at that point, you will basically go comatose. On March 21st of the next year, your body will reanimate and you'll wake up again, only to go back into a dormant state on September 21st. This is a microscopic organism that convinces its prey that it is something that you want to eat or something that you want to wear. Anything that gets itself close to you, that it can latch onto you and begin dissolving parts of your body. This is very similar to the scooper from Five Nights at Freddy's. It's a mechanical arm that is designed to extract your soul quite literally from your body. This is a neon sign that reads open, and when it's plugged into a building, nothing bad goes wrong, there's no problems. But when it is turned on and the sign is unplugged from the outlet it's plugged into, that building becomes impossible to enter. There's no way to get into it. And it also is indestructible. If you're experiencing an end of world situation, you just plug it in, turn it on, unplug it. Now and the building is no longer destructible. This is an autonomous drone that basically powers itself by feeding on small animals. This is an ordinary looking pinwheel. When someone gains possession, they believe that they can use it and direct it to send blasts of energy at an object. After that, they are actually able to no longer interact with that object. So if they blast it at a wall, they can walk through the wall. If they blast at a person, that person can no longer interact with them. They can no longer make physical contact. This is a mass of sharp objects like knives, needles, hooks that lures people, and they will get stuck and impaled on it and then pulled into it. No option for rescue. This is a complex entry. I'm gonna let you read it. I think it is one of the best descriptions of a non-humanoid alien that I've seen in a long time. This is the only transferable strain of cancer. If you contract it, there's a 25% chance that the tumor that ensues will have a squid developing in it for some reason. This is a colony of possibly trillions of microscopic sand mites, and formed together they look like a sand dune. But when sand dune catches anybody, any organism or any person, it will slowly dissolve them by taking bites out of them. It's essentially death by a billion cuts. This is a young girl that has animalistic features, and she has an allergy to anything that is artificial around her. So everything needs to be organic, and she promotes plant life. There's a reference to her being the daughter of a quote-unquote goddess, and anything that is artificial around her decays. We're looking at a cube that's about 100 square meters. So you enter the cube through one door, and then inside there are 2 additional doors that weren't perceived from the outside that you can enter, and those rooms create other room options to enter. So it's this labyrinth of cubed room. This is an HP graphing calculator that has the name Eric etched into it, which is important because that's a callback to 066, and the calculator is sentient. So if you type a question into it and then hit enter, like you're putting in a calculation, it'll respond to you with an appropriate answer based on the question. This is pretty much the Leviathan from the Bible. It's a giant monster. It's so large that it can cause continents to shift, and it breathes once every 3 months. This is what looks like a tube of super glue, but when you apply it between 2 objects, it allows them to actually pass through one another. And then after a set amount of time, the glue will actually bond on a molecular level. So if you happen to get some glue, some of the on your finger, you're losing part of your finger. Ouch. Is a foam that spreads square meters and acts like a brain, and any organism that is caught in the foam will be similar to the foam's neural system. You have the kind of the brain power to do whatever it does. This is creation is completely made of clockwork. This man, who is completely made of clockwork, will turn on and operate for 8 hours after a complete key turn. He has a hole, and he believes he's complete study. Very famous. Gonna try and do my best. This is a sculpture that looks very strange. Acts like a weak angel, but is way more violent. It can move when someone is making eye contact. So as someone is making eye contact with it, it will not move or get violent or go crazy. This is a lonely ventriloquist that persuades anyone around it to try and use it and perform an act with a ventriloquist dummy. Anyone that does so will perform a perfect ventriloquist act. It will telepathically influence the user to tell a story about the dummy being abandoned. This is a yellowed piece of paper. Anything that's within about 200 meters of the map will show up as a X marks the spot on the map, and so people will be able to go and find that buried object, and when they dig up the object, the map will reset. This is a time loop that can't be adjusted or changed in any way. There's a factory with scientists working on a device. These assailants break into the factory and they try and attack and take hold of the machine, but before they can do that, the machine explodes, and immediately at that point the whole scenario, which is only about 12 seconds, resets. This is a sentient chessboard, so if you start the game, you'll move and the board will respond. As the board plays more games, it gets better. It really doesn't like cheating though, so don't try it. This is a pair of paper 3D red-blue glasses that allow the viewer who's wearing them to see these giant bipedal entities around them in their normal daily life. If they try to interact with any of them though, these lacerations will start appearing on them that will eventually be more than they can handle. There's a lot that goes into this entry. The short version is that this is a woman who appears to be floating in space, believes that the sun is her brother, and that she acts as a lookout. She's aware of any extraterrestrial life that might be entering or approaching the Earth, and she takes care of it for us. So she's a protector of Earth. This is a hat that will steal the identity of the first person wearing it. That'll make that person completely unrecognizable, and then it will transplant that identity onto another person who wears the hat. This also works for animals, so you can look like your dog, or another person's dog. I won't say you can't. This person is quite literally the luckiest person alive. The Foundation uses him to complete tasks that have a very low chance of success. He was caught at a casino, makes sense. This is someone who has no ability to see or hear, but he's able to spectate other people's perceptions of reality, see what they're seeing and hear what they're hearing. He can do that with other organisms as well. This is an invisible organism that is able to create really strong monofilament wires that can cut through almost anything. The organism essentially acts like a spider. It does have some intelligence because it can actually create wires that are at specific lengths and tensions to create music. This is a box that is a dodecahedron that's made of metal. When you put this in a building, it will expand the space inside of the building without affecting the space outside of the building. So essentially it creates a TARDIS wherever it goes. An old wartime Russian radio with a keypad and an LCD screen added to it. The radio is able to decipher and decrypt any transmissions it receives, no matter the code, and if you use the keypad to type in a certain date, it will play a transmission from that time. I haven't used it yet to try and hear transmissions from the future. This is the site of an unrecorded battle between the German and Russian forces, and anomalous weapons were used. There's a whole list of the weapons that are found at this site on the end. This is a woman in her mid-20s who can see the present of an object or room or place or person, but if something significant is going to happen in the near future, she is aware of it and can see it. So she'll see a person in the present who is alive and well, and then she'll see the future version of them, which may not be that way. This is a volume of iridium metal, quite literally just anomalous, like things that are weird will happen in its It's all very discrete, but surprisingly complex. This is a parasite that is microscopic and will slowly replace all the hair on a mammal. So it will replace the follicle with itself. So you can have essentially the same hair, it'll look all the same, but sometimes the hair will move of its own. This is a wooden toy box that contains different things depending on the age of the person accessing it. It's really children that are younger than 10, and if a person that is older than 10 interacts with the toys that are retrieved by a person who is younger than 10, those toys get really dangerous for those people. This is a little girl who had most of her body replaced by cybernetic parts. She was experimented on a lot, and this is one of the only cases in which the Foundation works together with the GOC, the Global Occult Coalition, to save her. This is a vacuum X-ray tube that when inserted into an X-ray machine, whatever's in the resulting photo becomes the reality of the object or person X-rayed. So if there's nothing on the X-ray image, then that person will be cured. But it could also result in more diseases or other bad things. This is a snail that looks like a tissue box. It sheds a material that also looks like tissues, but the tissues have a chemical in them that boosts your mucus production. So if you grab a tissue, if you have a runny nose, and you use the tissue, it will only make more mucus. The 194 designation is assigned to various objects at various times. There's a lot more happening inside the entry than I can put in here, but at times it can be a rowboat, or a volleyball, or something a lot more mysterious and ominous. This is a drink that resembles whiskey, but upon drinking it, it increases your sensory capabilities as well as your violent tendencies. After it wears off though, it causes ulcers to develop internally. This is a person who traveled back in time and now exists in the same time as his younger version. The Foundation also has records of a person who's confirmed to be an older version of the two that exist in the same time, escaping containment and losing his life in the process. process. And to avoid creating a paradox, the Foundation is keeping this version that appeared to them in containment. This is a greenhouse. Greenhouse makes any plant inside sapient, interactive, and anthropomorphic. Going into this greenhouse is also universally a relaxing thing. But of course, something bad had to happen, and now it's under more strict containment. This is a cup. If the cup comes into contact with a human hand, it will fuse to that hand, and then it will fill with a bodily fluid. And the person will then become severely dehydrated and emaciated, and the only way that they can hope to survive is to consume the liquid in the cup. Once they finish consuming the full cup, it will refill, and that continues until the subject refuses to continue or becomes too dehydrated. These are ferns that grow fronds that become inflated and float into the air, and then those fronds will eventually transmit radio signals giving detailed information of the area below them. This is a child who began rapidly gaining weight when he entered adolescence. He ran away from home, ate something in the woods, came back, and now he is contained within this silk chrysalis. And there's nothing solid within the chrysalis. It's all used to genetic liquid, but he's forming into something else that we don't yet know what is. Like, follow, and comment your favorite.